Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Jones, and you are listening to the Exploring Death podcast. Hello, today's guest is Jeff Olsen. Jeff Olsen is a best-selling author and inspires audiences internationally with his intriguing story of perseverance and inner strength. In 1997, Jeff experienced a horrific automobile accident, which inflicted multiple life-threatening injuries, including crushing both of his legs. His left leg was amputated above the knee. The most devastating outcome of the accident was the loss of his wife and youngest son, both killed instantly. At that time, Jeff had profound out-of-body experiences, which gave him insights and gifts not common in today's world. After almost 6 months in the hospital and 18 surgeries, Jeff found the courage to carry on, heal, care for his living son, and eventually thrive in his career and community contributions. Olsen has appeared on many national and international radio and television programs, sharing his insights and gifts. And today, he is here with me on Exploring Death. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you, Lisa.
Oh, I am so thrilled to have you here. I just want to let everyone know that we met last week at the IANS conference, which is the International Association of Near-Death Studies, which for me was a life-changing experience, being around so many people that have had these out-of-body and near-death and shared death experiences. And your story was just amazing. And I'm so excited to have you here to share with our listeners about what you've been through and what you can share with them about living a more fulfilling life without them having to go through the near-death experience.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you.
So I don't know, where do you want to start? I mean, I know you've probably told your story 100 times, but I mean, what are you being called to share at this moment?
Yeah, it's important to share the story because that's the premise of everything that goes on. And I think it's important also to just remind people this happened it's been 20 years now. I mean, it was a horrific automobile accident. As you outlined, it maimed me for life with extensive injuries. But the loss of my spouse and my youngest son were just the whole rug gets ripped out from under you. And I couldn't speak of it for a decade. I mean, I couldn't even mention their names without just bursting into tears, even with everything that had happened. And I can talk about what happened. And it's interesting as I recount that. It was a single car rollover. I mean, we were on a family vacation. The whole family's in the car. You know, kids are buckled in the back seat in their car seats. I'm driving the car. Tamara, my wife, had reclined her seat. She was having a little nap, but she was still holding onto my hand. And it's funny, the moments, leading up to the accident are some of the most poignant. I mean, as I realized, she's holding my hand. And I'm thinking, wow, 10 years of marriage and 2 children, and here she is still holding my hand the same way she did on our first date, as college sweethearts. And I thought, what a lucky guy, and she's beautiful, and look at that. And I did glance in the rearview mirror too, just to check traffic, but I noticed the boys, and I noticed that my little toddler Griffin had also fallen fast asleep. So Tamara and Griffin are fast asleep. But I noticed him. I saw details. I mean, even in a glance, it's just a glance, but it's like time stopped. And in that glance, I'm like, wow, what a beautiful kid. I mean, he was our miracle baby. We were told we might not ever have any more children. And there he was. And I noticed how, just how long his eyelashes were, what a gift he was. And I felt that in this profound moment of glancing in the rearview mirror. And then I also noticed my 7-year-old who was playing with action figures. And the thing I noticed about him was the noises he was making. He was having all the grand sounds of a lightsaber battle. And I just thought, wow, how lucky am I to be surrounded with such love and these people, and what did I ever do to deserve this? And of course, then my attention was right on the driving and the interstate. But it was about an hour after that I lost control of the car. Now, there was reports of crosswinds over 100 miles an hour. There was reports of a truck that had been driving erratically in traffic. I do remember the wind. I don't remember a truck. The most difficult part of the story is I believe I I believe I may have dozed off just briefly. You know, when you just nod for a moment. Of course, I'm still holding Tamara's hand, and I swerved to the right. I overcorrected to the left, and I lost control of the car, and the car began to roll. Not off the road, but down the road. And I had the cruise control set at 75 miles an hour. So at high speed rollover, they say it rolled 6 to 8 times at least. A horrific accident. When the car came to a stop, the first thing I heard was Spencer crying in the back seat, my 7-year-old, hysterically crying. But as a father, I thought, oh, at least he's okay. Wow, he's okay. I've got to get to him. I've got to get to my son. And it was in that moment that I realized I couldn't move. I mean, I was pinned either to the floorboard or the seat. I wasn't sure. I was struggling to breathe. I was in intense pain. Had no idea of my injuries, which what had actually happened is both of my legs had been crushed and shattered. My left leg was amputated above the knee eventually. My rib cage had been damaged and my lungs were collapsing. I had broken my back, but ironically, the spinal column had not been damaged. My right arm had almost been torn off, and then the seatbelt had cut through me and ruptured all my insides. I had no idea. I just knew my little boy was crying, and I knew I had to get to him. But that's when the brutal reality hit that no one else was crying. And that's when I became aware in a very profound way that Tamara and Griffin were gone. And I saw that, I knew that, and it was the worst hell a man could be in. I mean, I've crashed the car, I've got a hysterical child, I'm losing consciousness, half the family's gone, and I was at the wheel. And the darkness of that, there really isn't words for. And I only share that because it was in that darkest moment that I'll probably ever know that light came. I mean, I felt light. It's like light came rushing and surrounded me, like to comfort me in this awful, awful moment. And it felt like it was love. It was almost like I was being embraced and lifted above the scene of the accident. And I kept thinking, wow, am I okay? Suddenly I could breathe. The pain was gone. I'm like, what's happening? Am I okay? And that was the question I was asking is, am I okay? And then as I came to terms with, wow, I can breathe. I'm fine. I'm okay. Suddenly Tamara, who I knew was deceased at the scene, was there with me in this, what felt like a bubble of light. And she was okay. And I don't want to get into too much detail because it's still difficult for me to go there, but in the accident, because she had reclined her seat and was sleeping, she had not been restrained properly, and it was some pretty severe head trauma that took her life. And I was aware of that at the scene. But here she was, you know, beautiful, okay, she was okay. I mean, I almost began crying, saying, you're okay, you're okay. And as I'm saying, we're okay, she's saying, I know, but you've got to go back, you've got to go back. You can't come, you've got to go back. And that was a very poignant moment of choice, because here I was looking at the woman I loved more than life, but I knew I had a little boy crying in the backseat of that car, and I made a choice. So the choice was to come back. And that was profound too, because I realized how powerful our intentions are, our thoughts. You know, as soon as I'm like, okay, I said goodbye and I'm going back. And then it wasn't like I flew. I mean, it was like just walking through one door to the next. Suddenly I was in a busy ER level 1 trauma hospital, moving about freely with no pain, but I was encountering everybody in that ER setting. I mean, the doctors, the nurses, the patients, the families of the patients, and I was seeing them completely differently. Like everyone I looked at, I knew everything about them. I mean, I knew their love, their hate, their joy, their motivations. I was feeling their lives as if they were with me. as if they were me. It's like I could feel the abuse that that nurse went through as a child, and yet I would feel the magnificence of her love and compassion because of what she had been through. Here she was healing people in a hospital with a past that was so damaging to herself, and yet she had overcome. I mean, I was feeling these people as just what magnificent beings, you know, feeling their happiness, their sadness, everything about them as if they were me, but in this light of aren't they magnificent? Wow. And I had this overwhelming unconditional love, just unconditional love for everyone I saw. And it didn't matter, you know, if they were a heroin addict or a very saintly, you know, elderly grandmother. It's like, wow, aren't they beautiful? I wanted to embrace them all. And then I finally came to a man or a body laying on the gurney that I didn't feel anything from, and stepped closer to look, to realize, oh my goodness, that's me. Except that wasn't me. I was me having this profound, connected oneness experience, but that was my body, and I was outside of it. And that's when I knew I've got to get back in. I've got to get back into that wreck of a body, which I had always taken for granted. That was a big learning moment too. I'm like, I'd been a Division I athlete. I was always healthy. And now it's like, wow, I never realized how fragile, you know, it all could be.
Oh my gosh, Jeff, I feel like you just took me on a roller coaster ride, which I'm sure was, you know, just pales in comparison to what your actual experience was. But thank you for recounting that. It's profound, obviously, what you went through. I mean, so few people have experienced that. And then to, like you said, to be surrounded by the love and to feel that oneness with all. I mean, that is just amazing. And so how is that, as you said, it took you almost 10 years to even speak of the accident, but how did that out of body experience or that connection with the love, how did that change your life?
Well, it changed me forever. I mean, first of all, judgments and comparisons just went out the window. I mean, suddenly, and I had been judgmental in my life. I mean, you know, suddenly I just realized that everybody's path is a beautiful path, even if it doesn't look like my path, and that there was not a right or a wrong way to do life. It was life. And that life was this beautiful gift, and that we had choices. I mean, I was really connecting with the power of choice. And, you know, of course, going back into the body was horrific, because when I made that choice, you know, suddenly the pain, the grief, the regret, the bereavement, the trauma, all of that came crashing in a profound way, which was very difficult. I mean, they had me ventilated, so I couldn't speak. I was in ICU for months. I kept throwing pulmonary embolisms, or the blood clots that lodge in your lungs. I had horrific infections, you know, with the rupturing of everything. And it was just, it was a journey that I wouldn't wish on anyone. But during that time, I seemed to have one foot in this realm and one foot into the next. And as you're well aware of with the work you do, wow, suddenly there wasn't this veil. It was almost like the door never closed. And I would even feel like I would step out of my body again just to take a break, you know, and kind of be in that oneness of everything that was going on. I had continued conversations with my wife who had passed. Now, I never encountered my little son, Griffin, the toddler, who in the accident was ejected from the car. His it's still so hard to, his car seat had broken up, and he was ejected from the car. And so I had not encountered him in any of that. And it was in the end of my hospital stay, which is quite ironic, because my two most powerful experiences were at the scene of the accident. You know, before I had been whisked to the hospital, and obviously I was on a lot of morphine and everything else while in ICU and during the recovery. But at the end of my hospital stay, when I was out of ICU, I was out of surgical recovery. I was actually in the rehabilitation center of the hospital. I was not taking any narcotics. I was taking a little bit of Tylenol. They had just done some repairs on my shoulder, but I was not heavily medicated. I had perhaps the most profound experience as I was going to sleep one night. And they had finally stabilized my abdominal wounds where I could finally lay on my side. They'd had to leave those wounds open for months because of the infection, but I was finally laying on my side. And I fell into a deep sleep, and I felt that light again. As I slept, I'm like, oh, this light. I remember this light. And it felt as if I was rising above the hospital bed. And the light this time dispersed. It went away. And I was in the most beautiful place. And, people use words like heaven or, the other side. The only word I can come close to even describe it was home. I was home. I mean, it's like I'm home, and I was running. And that was something I knew in this realm with, one leg that was cut off and one that was pretty badly damaged. I still have 6 pins and a plate holding my one good leg together, but I began to run. And it was a physical experience. I could feel the soft ground under my feet. I could feel the energy charging up through my calves and thighs. And I was just joyfully running, thinking, I'm home, I'm home. And then I got the message that I wasn't there to stay. I didn't get to stay, but that there was this corridor to my left. And I knew intuitively I'm to go down that corridor, which I did. And as I did, there was this crib at the end of the corridor. And I raced to the crib and I looked in, and there was my little boy. And he was sleeping as peacefully and as beautifully as he was when I peeked in the rearview mirror, just before the accident. And I scooped him up and held him. And I was marveling at this. I'm like, how can this be so physical? Because I could feel the heat of his body. I could feel his ribs expanding with every breath. I could feel his warm breath on my neck, knowing he's alive. I mean, I was feeling every bit of light and life and like every cell of his body. And I began to weep, just thinking, wow, do I really get to say goodbye to him too? Which I didn't want to say goodbye. I just wanted to stay there and hold him. And as I held him, I felt this immense presence come up behind me. And gosh, it was so big and wise and cosmic and powerful. I became a little fearful. I'd grown up in a conservative Christian home, and I thought, oh, wow, that's God. And I'm probably in trouble. In fact, it was very intense. I laughed, but it was intense because I'd raised thinking life's a test, God's going to judge me. But here I was holding my little boy. And the feelings I was having is he's gone because I lost control of the car. I crashed the car and he died, and that's why he's here. And I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, I hope I'm forgiven. I hope I'm forgiven. And as I had that thought, holding him there in my arms, I felt, and it felt very physical too, these divine arms wrap around and hold me.
Oh my God.
And this message just came of there's nothing to forgive. Everything is in perfect divine order. And it's as if my little boy became part of me, and then we became part of God. And then, it's so difficult to explain, but it's as if we became God. Suddenly, I just saw everything. I had this huge download of wisdom, of truth, of peace, of love, of divine knowing, if you will. And I saw my life. I saw my review. I saw my parents' divorce. I saw the insecurities it created in me. I saw that my athletic, endeavors were more a Band-Aid to cover up my own insecurities than anything else. I saw my brothers. I saw the accident. I saw my whole life, but I was seeing it in perfect divine order. In fact, I would see things and say, oh, no, that was a mistake. But then I would be reminded in such a profound way, there are no mistakes. I would see things and think, oh, I knew that was wrong, but I did it anyway, still thinking that God was going to judge me, right? But the whole message was, that's your judgment of it, not ours. We love you. We love you so profoundly. We love everyone so profoundly. Your life is perfect. You're perfect. You're divine, as is everyone else. So it was like this. It was like the experience in the hospital, seeing everybody in such a beautiful divine light, but maximized or multiplied. And yet I was seeing my own life through those eyes of saying, and you're just as dear to us as everyone else you encountered. And I just sat there and wept thinking, wow, we're all divine. We're all perfect. We're all part of that oneness. In fact, we are God, if you will. And yet here was God holding me, showing me that in such a profound way that I'll never forget. And I was given a choice. I was told, you can choose. You know, you can be mad at the universe for the rest of your life because your family was plucked away from you. Or you can beat yourself up for the rest of your life because you were driving the car. Or in this perfect moment, you have a choice to give your son back. And you know, that's when I kind of came back to myself, and here I am holding my son, and I've got what I call God behind me. And in all that love, it seemed perfect to literally exercise my will, to say, no one's taking anything. I will kiss him and freely give him, knowing that he had already passed away. I knew I couldn't change it, but I got to make a choice about it, which changed everything. And so I, in all that light and love, kissed my little boy and gave him back. And then I woke up back in the hospital bed, you know, back to all the injuries and everything that had gone on. But I had a little different perspective about life and choice, which didn't make it easy. I mean, like I say, for 10 years, I grieved like anyone would grieve. I was grateful I got to say goodbye. I didn't speak of it because I thought, how many people don't get to say goodbye to their loved ones who pass? There was the injuries to deal with. There was being a single parent. There was raising my son. There was all these things. And I fell in love again. I remarried. We adopted children. Life continued to roll on. But there was much of the time that I felt homesick. It's like, where's all that love, all that connection, all that peace here? I wasn't experiencing that. And then also too, life just goes on in ways where every day there's challenges that come up. But I just always had to remind myself, it's a choice. It's a choice, and I get to choose. I get to create it. Choose joy is what that's my little mantra that I say to myself is, I'm creating it. I get to choose it. And if I choose joy, even if it is in a crappy situation where I say, okay, what am I learning? What's the beauty of the expansion of my soul through this little thing? Then it all seems to make more sense.
Wow, that is amazing. That's just, I was just overwhelmed. I mean, literally tears just with that story of being able to reconnect with your young child and then having God come up and forgive you, your own torment of, and having that love surround you is so powerful. And I was going to ask you about that, about the grieving, because for me, I had a shared death experience, as many of my listeners know, and it transformed, I believe, my experience, because as you said, you can sit there and beat yourself up and choose that path to live that way, or you can move forward. So do you think that helped your grief in some way? Not to say that you don't grieve. I mean, I'm just trying to figure this out for myself, because I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, well, we're all trying to figure it out. It did. I mean, there was days that's all I could hold on to. It's like, right, okay, they're okay, and I'm okay. But see, then I would worry about my surviving son. And
right.
How do I raise him? How do I do this? And is he okay? And yet that was probably he was probably the anchor that really held me in this realm. That there was days I was suicidal, thinking I just want to go back home. Why all this? But I thought, well, I've got this son to raise, and I made this choice to come back, and there's great purpose in that. So let's carry on. Let's go one more day or one more breath, and see if we can hold it together. Like I say, things played out in a way, but I think had I not had those experiences for me in my life, I may have been strung out on some corner somewhere, just still wondering what happened, and blaming myself for all of it. So we all have different experiences. And they're diverse, but our emotions are quite universal. But this seemed to stabilize my emotions some days, where I thought, okay, I know that there's more to all of this than just this.
Right.
And there's purpose in it all. And yeah, so it did carry me through.
That's wonderful. And I think by sharing these stories, or I hope at least that it gives other people hope, even if they didn't have an out of body or or near-death experience. Um, I I think we're almost the messengers for people to give
Yeah.
them that glimpse of hope. And I don't know why some people are given that and some aren't. I know, I guess we're all just here to have different experiences, but I do think talking about this is helpful to people.
Yeah, it is. I mean, my own son, little 7-year-old boy, when he grew into manhood, he was probably 19 or 20. He said, I never had anything happen. You have dreams and visions, and it continues. I mean, my little toddler son that I held as a baby on the other realm, and I'm not pretending he's a toddler in heaven. In fact, he has come to me in dreams more recently as a beautiful, full-grown man, a young, man, but yeah, I recognize him completely. Tamara, my wife, continues to come to me and has even inspired my current wife, Tanya. She has, inspirations or feelings where she's thinking, I think Tamara is sending me a message today. But my son, who was 7 years old and grew up, said, nothing ever happened, Dad. I got nothing. And that was tough for me as a father. I'm like, wow, I'll give mine away if he can have any kind of, light or experience or a dream. And yet, it's funny because I do still pray. In fact, it drove me to my knees when he came to me and said, look, I got nothing. I think you could be full of it. Either you're making it up or you're, demented in some way, or if there is some greater power, it doesn't care about me. Because I was a little boy just beating down the door saying, I just want to see Mom once, and I got nothing. So I prayed about that. I said, why? I'll give it all away, give him anything. And that voice that speaks to your heart, God, if you will, whatever word you want to put on it. But there is a voice that speaks to my heart, and it said to me, why are you judging your son? Why do you think your experience is better than his? Or why do you think that you would trade yours? Don't you know he's on his perfect path? And his experience of having nothing is perfect for the expansion of his soul, where your experiences of having these things is probably the only thing keeping you, alive and well. Your job is to love him unconditionally without judgments and comparisons, and realize that we've got him. The whole universe is supporting his soul's journey, and to have no experience is perfect for him. And, he's now grown and married, and he's 28 years old, and he's working with traumatized kids. And he's the most deep, compassionate man I know. And yet it's beautiful. I mean, because he had no experience and kind of thought, well, maybe there's nothing there, he's embraced the notion of, what will I do about it then? Maybe I'm God's hands. Maybe I'm God's light. Maybe I'm God's love in the world. And what will I do to make a difference? And I've watched him do that and think, wow, okay, it was the perfect experience. And instead of relying on a greater power, he says, I'm going to do what I can today to make things better. And he's doing it, and it's beautiful.
Wow, that is just amazing. I love that, because I mean, exactly the fact that some people have the experience and some people don't. Why are we judging that? I thank you for saying that, because I know a lot of people wonder about that, or I wonder, why don't more people believe me or believe what's what I experienced? And that's why this conference that we were at last week was so transformative for me, because it was the first time I'd been around probably 300 people that are all on the same page or have experienced the same thing. So I feel like I was kind of wandering in that desert of, wondering about myself if I was crazy, right?
Am I nuts? Well, and that's been what's cool. And as you met at the conference, the interesting thing about my experience is my level 1 trauma doc and one of the trauma nurses is I was life flighted into the medical center, and the doctor, Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll is his name. He shared this at the conference with me. He had a profound experience. So I'm having my near-death experience and saying goodbye to Tamara. He didn't know us from Adam. He just wandered into the trauma room, into the ER room, as the surgeons all had started to work on me. And suddenly he says he saw Tamara, standing above my body. He saw this thing, and it's almost as I'm saying goodbye to her, he's saying hello, thinking, oh my goodness, I'm seeing this full apparition of this poor guy's deceased wife, and yet she communicated to him. And it was interesting. The first time he shared this with me, I said, what was she communicating? And he said, well, she was simply sharing her gratitude for what we were doing to save your life, probably concerned about Spencer, my oldest son. And when he said that, I burst into tears. I said, that's exactly what she would do, and yet as I was thinking, am I crazy? Am I, because when he shared that, I thought, well, I can kind of share with him some of the things I've experienced. And it was a really good gauge for me, because I thought, this guy doesn't know me from Adam. He's not family. He's not even a friend. We became friends eventually. But I thought, if he's willing to share that with me, I can share what I'm experiencing. And if I'm nuts, he'll
Right.
say, Mr. Olsen, we need to refer you to the psychiatric ward. But I was lucky enough that he would listen, and he would say, well, I've experienced things like that in the ER. I don't think you're crazy. You seem quite sound. And yet I still didn't share this. Like I say, I was very tight-lipped for a whole decade. Family members knew what I had experienced. And I even had to be careful with that, because some of them are like, yeah,
Right. Absolutely. I mean,
yeah.
everyone has their own beliefs and their own experiences and so, right. And like you said, who are we to judge what they believe or what they don't believe?
Right.
And the more that we can just be who we are and share our truth, I think the brighter our light is. And for those that need it, then they can bathe in it. And those that don't, they can just go on their way. So
Right.
that's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, I would love to do a little reading for you if you're open to that.
Oh, I would love that. I would be honored. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Let me, I do a 3-card reading, and I'll just pull some cards and see what the universe or God or whoever, I don't know who does this, but it seems to
Yeah,
always have some good information.
there's no accidents. Whatever
That's
comes up, there's always relevance to it. So
that's for
I'm totally
sure.
open.
Absolutely. Okay, well, the first card is adventure.
Oh,
And
wow.
what the way the cards work is generally the first card is the blockage card. So so adventure, what I'm getting is that there's really more adventure for you than that's apparent right now. That you're really, you've been on an adventure for sure, but it's just going to continue. And I'm definitely getting that, with your story and you've got a book out and you're, just things are really ramping up. It's all just starting is what they're saying. And wow,
Oh,
your
okay.
outcome, look at that, or not your outcome, but this is your action is success.
Success.
Yes. So your
There you go.
action is just, this is a success. You are a success. Your story is such a moving, powerful story for people to hear. It's such a testimony. And the whole idea of the consciousness that's rising right now in our environment, in our world, and you're one of the truth tellers, one of the leaders in this area with your profound story. It's really life-changing for people to hear. And so that's what the success is, that it's just going to continue. And then your outcome card is commitment. Just continue,
Wow.
your commitment toward sharing your voice and your truth. And the more powerful that you stand in who you are and what you're here to do, the more, they're saying the more adventurous your experience is going to be. So does that sit well with you?
It does. I mean, it does. The adventure thing. I mean, I think, gosh, I got gray hair now. Do I really want more adventure? But I thrive on it. I mean, I do love a new adventure. The success thing is perfect and
Right.
beautiful, because I still doubt myself. I mean, to be completely vulnerable, it's like, oh, do I really want to do that? Maybe I should just, become just stop all this nonsense and go get a normal job and be happy. And then the commitment thing. I mean, that's just kind of a validator that, what, I mean, I was told by that same voice that speaks to the heart, share your experience and people will heal. And I'm all about healing. I mean, that's what I want. I've experienced some of my own healing, and I'm still on that path to healing. So those are perfect cards for me. And each of them resonates deeper than, than just the word.
Absolutely. And I just have to share, my whole body is chilling, which is truth, because this picture, and I'll describe it because people that are listening, it's a picture of a woman with a heart coming out. And I mean, I get emotional because I know this is your wife. This is a picture of your wife saying that you've made this commitment, to her and to your child that passed, and that, you're here to truly share their life, their love. And,
you're making me go too. Yeah, no, and I may have shared this at the conference, but she does speak to me. And when I was falling in love with Tanya, my current wife, I went to my first wife's grave. I cried on her grave saying, I'm having feelings for another woman. And how could you do this to me? How could you leave me? How could you go, And that's what she told me, is I loved you enough to go.
Yes.
There was a different plan and you wouldn't be doing what you're doing, but we're here. We got you. We're championing you. And we loved you enough to go. There was no accidents in any of it. It was all part of your soul's journey, all part of the major plan. And I loved you unconditionally enough to go to the other realms and just cheer you on and support you, because I would have loved to stay and grow old.
Right. Well, I love that, because one of the things I learned when I had my second child is that love does not divide, it multiplies.
Yeah.
And the same when my husband passed away, and then I met my second husband, and even, my adoption. I mean, I was born by these two people and given to others. I mean, I have so much abundance of love in my life because there's so many people that just, and then when those end, something new comes in. So it's the same of the love that's in the universe for us. We are so loved. That is the message I get every single day that I channel messages, is the first thing they say is, you are so loved. And if people knew just an ounce of the love that we have, that we are loved by the universe or God, or like you said, whatever term you want to use, we would all just be walking around so much happier. But instead we all feel so cut off and so alone, So.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And thank you for sharing that, because that's very personal, and that really does, that connects in a big way. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, tell people the name of your book and what you're up to and how they can get a hold of you, and anything else you'd like to share.
Yeah, no, the name of my book is Knowing, just one word, Knowing, and it's available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Just look up Knowing by Jeffrey Olsen, and Olsen is Olsen. And gosh, I'm working with a television network. I'm committed to do good in the world. And so, we want to get enlightened content and good things in front of people. You can certainly follow me on Facebook and Instagram and all the social media things, but boy, the parting words for me is just go do something nice for somebody else today, and notice how that makes you feel. And that's the beauty. I mean, heaven can be right here if we just embrace that love and share it and spread it and be our part of that whole movement of being love. And it makes a big difference.
I love it. We will end on that note. And Jeff, thank you so much. This was such an honor to chat with you and be able to talk about your story. And truly, you are making a huge difference in this world. And I just want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor, Lisa. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I hope our paths cross really soon.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you everyone for listening today. And until next time, aloha. Thank you for listening to the Exploring Death podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any financial or legal decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Exploring Death. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.